This is the Protestant Libertarian Podcast, a project of the Libertarian Christian Institute and part of the Christians for Liberty Network. I really hope that you guys enjoy today's show. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Protestant Libertarian Podcast. My guest today is Kyle Scott. Kyle is an entrepreneur, small business owner, investor, and personal friend. In 2024, he wrote and self-published a book entitled Faith and Finances, the Most Neglected Yet Important Areas of Life, in which he discusses his faith journey and the unconventional trajectory of his career, as well as the relationship between faith and finances. We will be discussing this book on the show today. Kyle, welcome to the Protestant Libertarian Podcast.
Alex, thank you so much for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Well, these are always fun. I don't often get an opportunity to have people on the show that are like my personal friends that I know in real life. So it's cool to actually be able to talk to you in this format too. I know your story, and I know that later on in this interview, we're going to talk about your story in more detail, but just give my audience the overview. Just tell them a little bit about yourself, your background, and the work that you do.
Sure. So I have a family of my wife and two daughters. I'm an entrepreneur that has a handful of endeavors that I pursue. My main vocation, if you were to ask me, what is it that I mainly do? It's video production. It's been a space that I've been in since I was a kid. High school is when it all started for me. I was in a media class. I knew that was what I wanted to do. Even before that, I knew I wanted to be a sports reporter. So I pursued video production. Early on, it was before or in front of the camera. After, as it progressed and, time revealed different things to me about what was important and really what I want to do with my life, it transitioned to behind the camera. So more so video production today and creating promotional, infomercial, commercial, different, content creation, I guess maybe a more applicable word today as people may know it as. But video production is my vocation. Not far behind that is real estate. I invest, I property manage, and host. For those familiar with the short-term rentals, so Airbnb or VRBO, I'm in that space. My wife and I both are in that space as well. And those are the two things that take up the bulk of my time as far as providing for the family. We homeschool. So my youngest will start first grade in the fall. My oldest, will start seventh grade. So we've been doing the homeschool thing since after COVID. And it wasn't actually because of COVID that we started homeschool. It's actually something we wanted to pursue prior to, but my wife didn't think we could do it. And then COVID happened and we were kind of forced to do it a little bit, like at least a version of it. And then we realized hey, we want to have this freedom to be with our girls as much as we possibly can because that time is so short, and to travel and to do the things that we want to do. And so, after she finished second grade, we started that homeschool journey. And so, that's pretty much the focus of my daily, my family, and again my work in the video space and the real estate space.
Well, and the story behind why you wrote the book is related to that too. And it's pretty cool because, a lot of people, they write books just because they want to get their ideas out there and everything like that, which is a part of the reason for you writing the book. But you also have a much more personal, set of motivations for that. So just talk to us about why you chose to write Faith and Finance. What was the driving force behind that?
Yeah, so I wanted to leave behind something for my family, whether that's my kids, especially my kids, but my kids' kids and kids' kids to go to see how we did it. And I say we did it, my wife and I, because we are doing something very different from what our families have done, just going through the motions. We both had great childhoods, no knock on our parents, but just a simple middle class pursuit. And we're doing something much different. Homeschool wasn't something that either one of us did. Investing wasn't, other than a 401k, but real estate investing wasn't something either of us were familiar with. Being an entrepreneur certainly wasn't something that either one of us were familiar with. So we're doing stuff very differently than what we were taught, and at least from our family. So I wanted to document this, keep this, put it in writing for my kids to read, to see how mom and dad did it, how we pursued our relationship with each other, how we pursued our relationship with Jesus, our businesses. And so that they don't just inherit what we believe will be a great gift, financially, but the tools to do it themselves. Like, I don't want to just hand them something, the keys to the car and then let them go wild. Like, I want them to know how to do it themselves, when they take this over, what we have that we're building for them, and not just them, but their kids and their kids, to teach them the principles, the values that we live by, what work for us and what we believe is true. And it's from, God's word. That is my go-to book. And from there, just taking the lessons from that and reading personal development books and seeing how they cross, intersect, and applying those things that best fit, our principles. And so I put it in my own words, if you will, just so I can hand down that legacy of our family, to know where it all started, why it started, how, and for them to do it themselves, and not just, again, have a generational wealth mentality. I want them to have like the generational tools to do it themselves. But my wife and I also believe that, to take care of our kids, we don't want to just take care of our kids, but take care of our kids, and others around us, to take care of those around us in our community, around the world, wherever we see fit, to be benevolent and just give back.
Yeah. And one of the things that you do in the introduction to your book that I think is really helpful in this space is you talk about the need to make sure that you have your priorities straight, because there are a lot of people, even Christians, that go into business for reasons that are completely unrelated to their walk with Jesus. And in framing the entire book as a matter of, hey, once you outline your priorities and get them in order, then that's got to be your fundamental starting point. I think that's a great place to begin. So just talk to us about why it's so important to think about your priorities and make sure that you have your priorities right.
Yeah, I mean, there's a book that I've read that, again, that intersected really with God's word, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And one of his principles or habits, if you was, first things first. And to me, like the first thing, and that I include in everything, is my faith. So when I include my faith in everything I do, I have a lot more clarity than I would if I were to think practically. And I can give you plenty of examples of how things have panned out when I thought practically. Like, yes, I can, analyze things and think practically, but also really just trust God to lead the way. Also, when I don't put him into the picture and in that equation of making decisions, then things start to get a little complicated and maybe might not make the best decision. So my faith has to be in everything that I do. And my time, my priorities are to focus on, the gifts that God has given me, my abilities, my resources, opportunities. I mean, I feel like I'm as blessed as anyone in the world. So my part of what I have to do is bless others with those. It's not to keep it for myself. And so I want to use what God has given me to the best of my ability. And I don't know how much time I have. Time is our most precious commodity. And it's the one thing we're not going to get more of. Can't get it back. We don't know when it's going to end either. So I want to make sure that I'm doing the best with what I can right now. And right now, to me, the most important thing, my faith, passing that along to our kids, being with our kids. They're right at this moment in time, they're 12 and 6. So, that time with them is, God willing, it's winding down, right? The 12-year-old, like she'll be 18 in a quick, short 6 years. And so it just goes by so fast. And so I want to make sure that I'm having the best use of my time as possible. And so when I allow my faith to work through that, and, I typically make better decisions, to spend more time with them, to do the right thing, from using my gifts, making, God proud of what I'm doing with my gifts. I'm not wasting time. I guess to put shortly, I'm not wasting what God has given me and the time that he's given me, because I have no idea, when that's going to end.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great place to start this. And so obviously the title of your book is Faith and Finances, and you talk about how they're two of the most important things in life. So what's so significant about both of those? Why should those be kind of the priority for faithful people?
Sure. For my experience, I certainly had a worldly approach. Growing up, I said I wanted to be on TV. That's that's putting yourself on a platform right to begin with. Like, I wanted to be on SportsCenter. So my goal was to be on TV. I achieved that. I was in that space for almost 10 years. Really was 10 years, I guess, because I left and I was asked to come back, and I just did Friday Night Football. So it was a 10-year period where I did this right here, right in front of a camera, and it was sports. And along the way is when my faith journey really began. I didn't hit rock bottom, or nothing significant, if you will, happened in my life. I just happened to come across the Bible, start to read it for myself, and realize really how far off the mark I was. Like, I was glorifying the wrong things, pursuing the wrong things. The world would have said, "Oh, he's a good guy," but behind the scenes, I wasn't, that good at all. Whether my thoughts or what I was doing. And so that really checked me. And so once I pursued my faith, I started to discover things that, I didn't really like about, myself and what I was doing. So something needed to change. And so I realized that's where my purpose was, to pursue his word. And so my faith revealed so much more to me, and it revealed to me really what my purpose and purposes are. So that's why I think faith, first and foremost, is that's the most important thing. I mean, Jesus even said the greatest commandment, it's kind of a 1A, 1B, I say in my book, like to love God, to love others as yourself, you love your neighbor. So faith, huge for me. And I try to put that, like I said, in every single thing that I do. As far as the financial part, money was never really an aspiration of mine. If you were to ask anybody, even today, that's in the TV industry, they actually don't make that much money unless you are on a sports center or something like that. So the pay wasn't what I was after. My wife had a good W-2 job, so she was providing for her. She was the breadwinner for the longest time. And so money was never like the driving force. It was just to be on TV, quote unquote, be famous, if you will. I don't think I would have said that to you when I was in it. Like, I enjoyed storytelling, which I did and still do, because that's why I still do video production. I love to tell a story, especially through video. But once I left, I did kind of feel that worldly pull, like, oh, you're not going to be on TV anymore. So that definitely convicted me along the way, but it didn't take long to get past that. But as I pursued video production and started to pursue personal development, however that fell into my lap, I started to make more money and realize that I can make more impact with that. So those two together, and some maybe think of, where's family at in all this? I say that in my book, how I kind of clarify faith and family being part, as one. But the title of faith, family, friends, and finance, like the title just wasn't as much of a category. But anyway, so the faith and finances, to me, when I focus on those two things, and more importantly, include my faith in my finances, because it is easy to get caught up in the numbers and want to hold to that. But what I've discovered is that, the more you give from that, the more you're going to get in return.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Why is it that so many people neglect both of these areas in their life? Why do people decide that they don't want to make these central to their kind of pursuit of a good life?
Well, I definitely have a politically correct response to this.
Well, this is a
Correct.
libertarian podcast. We're all about political incorrectness here. So whatever you got to
So,
say.
at the end of the day, I feel like it really is a time and effort type of deal. Like, these are hard things. Our faith is a hard thing. It is a daily walk. It is an every single moment walk. So it's hard to stay on that straight and narrow. It's easy to conform, as it says in the word, like to conform to the pattern of this world, to get distracted by all the things. And it's not easy to stay focused on Jesus with all these distractions. And so, one, it takes effort, to read God's word. It takes the time to do so, and then to make the changes. Like, you can allow it to convict you and say, you know what, that offends me, I'm not going to do it. Or you can say, you know what, like, this is what, I feel this way, and it's convicting me because God's trying to change me. He's doing a work in me, if you allow it to. And so it's hard. It can be hard. It can be offending, or whatever, however you want to put it. And when it comes to finances, same deal. Like, I wouldn't consider myself, a numbers person. If you were to ask me 5 years ago, I'd have been like, no way I can hop into the real estate space. Maybe a little more than 5 years ago, but no way I can hop into that, because I'm not a numbers guy. So once I start to educate myself, it was a process. It was difficult. It took a lot of time for me to really wrap my head around, being financially literate. And so most people are financially illiterate. I fell into that category. And so once I started to read and understand how, the monetary system works, financial, banking and stuff like that, it was clear to me. Like, it took effort, both took effort to do, but it was so rewarding. It's like anything else, right? You're going to get what you put into it. And if it was easy, everyone would do it. And maybe the politically incorrect way of saying it is, I don't think the government and the system wants people to be financially literate. They want people to pursue their faith, because both of those areas, what I've discovered, is where I found freedom. Like, where I pursued God's word. I mean, it says, you will be set free,
Yeah.
if you put it all on Jesus. And when I pursued that, I realized just how freeing that relationship was. I wasn't tied to a lot of the worldly things. And of course, school systems, and I get it, like they don't want Jesus in the school system, that, don't even say his name. It is encouraging to see, especially today and where we're at in this area, just how people, at least that I know, are rallying around it. And I have friends that say that their kids take their Bible to school. And I think that's incredibly bold and courageous of them. So I'm just speaking in general terms, but that's not something that schools I put like push that agenda of, hey, like let's talk about Jesus today. So I'm not suggesting that there be a faith-based class, but
Right.
just allow him into the school building and see what he can do. And at least growing up, there was no financial classes. Like, again, this wasn't something that my family passed along to
Yeah.
me. I just kind of stumbled upon real estate investing in that space in general, but it was never introduced to me in school. And I know there are some schools today that teach financial literacy and stuff like that. So I'm not going to say it's not out there, but I like how Henry Ford put it. The creator of Ford Motors, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but he's like, if people understood how the banking system worked and the monetary system worked, then there would probably be a revolution by the morning. Because once I understood that, it was incredible how quickly we could do things. And it's difficult for an entrepreneur like myself. And that's a whole nother, reason. Like, the government doesn't want to create entrepreneurs. They want to create employees. They want people to
Right.
depend on them, not to be able to do it on their own. That's why it is so hard to be an entrepreneur. I mean, the taxes that we occur every single year, like the things that I have to get back, we pay taxes, even though we don't go to school. I mean, there's a whole laundry list of things that are like roadblocks, but they're obstacles. And I believe they're obstacles there for me to overcome. They're not to keep me from, like, okay, well, you won, but that motivates me to do all the more. So it's not something that those in power and control want to see more of. I don't think they want to see more entrepreneurs. I don't want to think they want to see more people talking and sharing about Jesus and encouraging people through God's word and lifting up his word and investing and doing things the right way, because they want us to depend on them. And all that does is motivate me all the more.
I love that. I love it. Well, you also talk about how we have to cultivate our faith, and I think you even quote from the movie Joe Dirt in the book. Where Joe Dirt has that line where he says, "Life's a garden, dig it," which is a fantastic movie, by the way. But I love the analogy that faith is kind of like a garden that you have to cultivate. What do you mean by that? Kind of explain why you were drawn to that imagery.
So I did, I did reference Joe Dirt. Office also referenced James Allen book, "As a Man Thinketh," because that's where the idea came from. But I definitely put a spin on it with a more modern, relatable quote: "Life's a garden, dig it." But just that thought that you think about what it takes, to create a garden and to cultivate that. The plowing, the planting, the watering, the pruning, all the things that go into that, the steps and the time and effort that goes into that to produce something good. And the same is true with our minds, our hearts. Like Proverbs says, guard your heart above all else, because everything comes from that. So you have to take care of that. Like, if you allow garbage in, then that's more than likely what you're going to produce somewhere along the way. So cultivating a strong mindset, cultivating an abundance mindset, like there's plenty to go around and to take care of other people. It is a daily walk, at least for me, like holding myself accountable, because we're at home, so my girls see me pretty much all day long. So everything I say, I do, like they're right there absorbing whatever dad has to say. In fact, one of our rules here is whatever dad says, they can say. So that's not to say I have to say things always correctly, but that holds me accountable. My oldest will check me real quick. She's like, "Well, dad said it." And I'm like, great. So it's a daily thing where I have to cultivate this on, for them to see, for others to see. But, most importantly, again, it starts at home, like cultivating a strong faith with my family, that foundation, training them up in God's word, all the things that, the Bible tells us to do. And again, I like to relate things, these secular books, if you will, and with God's word, and see where they intersect and just make sense of it. So people might find that not as intimidating. Like, the Bible can be pretty intimidating to read. It's difficult to read, but there are other books out there that just put a different spin on it. So that was kind of my goal too, to simplify it, because I like to think it's a pretty simple read,
Right.
and that people can associate, like, oh, okay, like I get what he's saying by tying it in with this scripture and his experience, and maybe other books like As a Man Thinketh and like Joe Dirt.
Right. Well, related to these two things is the idea of prosperity, which you discuss in the book. And prosperity has been a little bit of a dirty word in American Christianity because it's
Yep.
often associated with like prosperity gospel preachers like Joel Osteen. And for those of us who are within kind of like the Orthodox Christian tradition, we just understand that's theologically problematic on a number of levels. And their message is that, if you put your faith in God, or really, and if you put your faith in the person who's preaching the prosperity gospel, then God's going to bless you with a lot of money and things like that. You argue that that's not really a good framework for understanding how prosperity works. So talk to us about what you mean by prosperity in your book.
Yeah, I think I said that within the first 5 to 7 pages that this is not a prosperity message. Like, just because you put your faith in Jesus doesn't mean that you're going to get paychecks in the mail. And that's not how this works. What I've discovered is that when I put him first and put him in everything that I do, I am going to make better decisions. And that is going to lead to prosperity. And for me, it's a mindset. It's not necessarily money and possessions, but it's like an abundance of time, abundance of opportunities, of resources. Like, especially here in America, we have far more resources and opportunities than anyone else. And I don't want to waste that. So I have this mindset that there's more than enough to go around, and that I've been blessed to be a blessing. And that the more that I give, I've discovered that I get in return easily. I mean, I can give plenty of examples, especially how my business grew, video production, as it grew. As I start to give back and work with missionaries, I like after I would go on a mission trip. So if I could rewind just a little bit, when I started going to Guatemala, business wasn't doing well financially. I was incredibly fulfilled because I was going to Guatemala multiple times to do videos for ministries. Wasn't making a ton. It was basically pay my way down and a few extra bucks because I'm gone for a week and my wife's back with our only child at the time. But it was incredibly rewarding. But at the same time, I eventually needed to make money. And what I discovered was, as I was doing that, other corporate job opportunities just happened to come along. So when I got back to the stateside, I was working with corporate partners that could certainly pay the bills versus my missionary partner. So today I have my corporate rate, if you will, and my ministry and missionary rate, because, that's not something that, they allot for really when it comes to video content. Although I'd argue it's probably one of the first things they should to get their message out there, especially in today's age. And I try to tell them that, especially at the cost to them, if you will. I try to tell them it's not really a cost. You have to look at it as an investment. I know that sounds like a sales pitch, but it's to get their message out. And it's at a fraction of what I charge corporate, my corporate clients. So it was never about making money. I told you how, I was not making a ton in the TV industry, but as I started to really implement my faith in the steps that the Bible, lays out for us to do, how we should pursue our daily, I start to realize that it could be a tool. My faith could be a tool for how I operate my business, that I don't have to be greedy, that I don't have to keep it all to myself, and to give of my time and my talents, not as well as financially, right? Tithing, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But as I did those things, he started to replenish those things. I mean, I've heard it said that, you cannot outgive God. So as I give, he, blesses me in return. Obviously, with that gratification that, hey, I just did his will, what was good and pleasing to him. But around the corner, I know if I stay faithful, he's going to stay faithful to me. I mean, I started my business in 2015. So here we are 10 years, more than 10 years later, still doing my own thing. And when I tell people how I go about my day and how I go about growing my business, if you will, most say that would make me incredibly anxious or, very stressful of how you go about, providing for you. I am the sole provider. My wife does have side jobs. She helps run, she keeps the books for video and our real estate. But at the end of the day, it is what I bring in that provides for us. So it could be stressful if I allowed myself to think of it that way. But all he's done is bless me, as I feel like, I'm a blessing to others with what he's given me. So really, that prosperous word, it's about time for me. It's about time and the abundance of it, and the abundance of using my gifts for him, for his kingdom, and building up his kingdom, not about building it here. So, money is just a tool for us to grow his kingdom, to make an impact while we're here. And again, just share it. There's an abundance of it. That's the one thing we can get more of if we go after. But the time piece, that is what it is.
Yeah, you talk about tithing in your book too, and you say that it's really a matter of the heart, and that's something that we've discussed on the show before. The 10% figure is arbitrary for Christians. That was kind of the Levitical threshold for giving in the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, if you look at like 2 Corinthians 8 and 9, it's all about giving from the heart and making sure that you're doing with the right intention. You kind of talk about that in your book as well. So why is tithing such a hard issue, and what's your pitch for Christians who might be on the fence about whether or not they should be generous with the money that they've been given?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, it's easy to cling to that, right? As an entrepreneur, like I said, I don't have a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks or every week, whatever that looks like. I'm not guaranteed any of that, other than the outstanding work that I have right now. Like, it's easy to want to cling to that. Like, oh, am I going to get that next job or that next opportunity? But we faithfully give. Like, we have an amount that we give to churches, to ministries, every single month. So we have an allotted amount. And after that, that's just the baseline. So when we feel called to give, like if there's an opportunity for us to give, sure, we'll pray about it. But at the same time, I think that's kind of a cop out sometimes, like, in your heart when it's the right thing to do. And so, I mean, we've recently just got to experience that. We knew in our hearts. I appreciate my wife kind of redirecting my focus, because it was something that we could have done for a while and that we were aware of. And she said, well, maybe we should pray about it. And the moment she said that, it checked me. I was like, you know what? I know what the right thing to do is. Like, I appreciate her calling that out, but right then and there, I knew what to do. And so we did it. So that was, you really do have to let it work through your heart. I mean, the moment you really start thinking, like, yes, you have to think practically. You have to do the prayer, about praying about something. I do believe in those things. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, especially as you get your relationship with Jesus grows, he will point you down that right path, what you should do pretty quickly. It's just a matter of not if we really want to listen to it. I mean, that's the hard part. Like, most of the times he's going to reveal things that are going to be difficult to do. Letting go of our finances, quote unquote, our finances, trusting him with them. You're not going to regret doing something that is going to move forward, move his kingdom forward and make a difference in that way. And again, I'm not suggesting that you go and sell everything that you have, like it says in the Bible. God will call you to different things. The closer you get to him, he'll reveal more to you. That's been my experience. But yeah, that 10%, if you will, we have a baseline. I don't even know if it's 10%, to be honest with you. It's one of those things I know in my heart that we have the ministries that we give to every single month. A certain amount comes out. And after that, it's just whatever our heart calls us to. The most recent one was a pretty big one. We were excited to do. And it's not something we do, every year, what we did. And at the same time, I realize it's not one of those things you go out and share about, which is why I'm not, sharing the numbers, but it is one of those things that, I think people can relate to, and that you will know when God is telling you to give and really how much to give, as long as you're kind of staying connected to him through prayer and just a daily walk and that daily connection with him. And so just trusting him, it's far easier said than done, but that's been my experience. I 100% would not think my vocation, my video production business would be here today if I didn't trust him with that process of, especially the financial part. It was a scary thing for my wife. I trusted that God was going to provide. And I thought we thought practically about it, but when she left her job, it was all on me. She had a W-2 coming in, so that was nice and safe, but trusting him in that process. And again, I'm not suggesting people leave their job. It's just like, take time to pray through this. We did that. We prayed through it. It took time for us to really do it. But we did it. Like, we trusted him with it. And on the other side of that, all he's done is be faithful in return.
Yeah, and you spend a lot of time in your book talking about your personal story, and I want to discuss that a little bit as well. So, when you were younger and you were right out of college, you wanted to be on ESPN, and you had this kind of goal of being on TV, and this was what really motivated and drove you. But throughout your life, you really felt that God was kind of pressing you in ways you hadn't understood before. So, maybe talk to us a little bit about your own faith journey. Like, how did you get from where you were as a young person to where you are today? And then how that impacted the way that you thought about your job.
Sure. 27 years old. I was in Huntington, West Virginia. I was in TV. I was a sports reporter. Came across a Gideon Bible, and I include this story in the book, but the Cliff Notes version is start to read it. And that's when I start to realize, like, wow, like I said, I was a Christian. I was a believer. I was brought up in church. My mom made me go to church, me and my brother. And I wasn't exactly living out that example. And that, his word convicted me, pretty quickly. And so as I start to read more of it, excuse me, as I start to read more of it, I started to realize things needed to change. And so as I pursued my faith, that at that time I was only under a 1-year contract with that station, and I decided not to resign because a number of reasons. But again, my faith certainly played a role into that. So I was unemployed for 16, 18 months or so a decent amount of time. But during that time was the most fulfilling part of my life. We didn't have any kids. My wife had a job, so she was providing for us. I was getting unemployment, which, not to go down a different rabbit hole, but I understand why people don't want to work. Because again, the government wants us to think that we can rely on them. I was getting paid a ridiculous amount of money to do nothing. I say nothing. I wasn't working, right? But during that time is really when my faith journey began. I was spending multiple days in different churches. I was raised in the Catholic Church, and that's all I thought was out there. And then I started to go to other churches, from Baptist to Protestant to Presbyterian, you name it, whatever was in town. Like that's how on fire I was. And it would be on a Wednesday, on a Tuesday. I remember during the Easter time, like I was going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Like I was going all the time and to different churches. So I was definitely trying to figure this thing out, which that revealed more to me, just that whole process. And during that time, I was volunteering on a regular basis. I was working with the Habitat for Humanity in town there. So I was getting really to live out God's word for a season. But I also realized I had to get back to work. So eventually I landed another job in TV in Lexington, Kentucky at that time. So we moved. It was closer to home. And then I, got away from the word as much as I was, I realized I had to get back to work. But I wasn't in the word, living it out as I was in Huntington. And so I noticed a shift again. And so, I was in the word on a daily basis still. Nothing changed there, but I wasn't living it out. I didn't feel like anymore. So it started to reveal to me like, hey, like I'm giving you another opportunity to get back into this, to show you that this is not what you're called to do. So in time after that contract expired, I prayed a while about what to do next, because I was like, this is all I've ever known. It's all I've ever wanted to pursue. And what I realized was I had an incredible skill set from TV. Like I had developed a skill set that was pretty desirable. And I did not realize, I didn't know what I didn't know. And, as I stepped out and as I prayed about it, my wife explained to me how, she wanted more of a family structure. And obviously in TV, it's non-existent. You work weekends, right. You work holidays, a lot of hours. And so I was like, cool, I've been praying about this. And I think that kind of surprised her, because she was like, oh, like here, I thought you were wanting to climb the ladder and be on TV and famous, all these things. I was like, actually, things were shifting. And so eventually left the TV industry and really started to walk out, my faith and trust in God with that process. But again, it was all his word. It all started with his word. So, fast forward, I guess 14 years from that point, and, it's still part of my daily that I have to, shouldn't say I have to, it's one of the things I look forward to, jumping in his word and doing a devotional every day. It holds me accountable. It provides me with clarity and a good start to my day. And it's just, I know the moment it's missing, but at the same time, I rarely miss it, because it's like brushing my teeth,
right.
One of those things I do every single day. And it keeps me, on a great start. Some people say like make your bed so you achieve something in a day. Well, I don't make my bed. I jump in His Word and do a devotional and get my mind right. That's what gets like that's a win in my book. And the best way that I can start the day is just in prayer with Him and in His Word.
Yeah, and you said that like your faith journey and just kind of the changes in your career and the way that that shaped your perspective, it completely altered the trajectory of your career in some surprising ways. And so, how did that nudging that you got from God shape what you would eventually wind up doing today? Like, how did that alter the course of your career from I want to be on ESPN to where you are right now?
Yeah. Boy, I just felt like I was glorifying and doing all the, I wouldn't say doing all the wrong things, but I was putting myself on a pedestal. I was putting others who I didn't think probably should be on it. Like I was in locker rooms. I heard a lot of things, saw a lot of things. And I'm thinking, I'm putting these people on TV, promoting them. I'm putting myself on that platform. I'm as broke as anyone else, and they are as well. So, sports, as much as I love them and they have tremendous value, it really left a bad taste in my mouth. To the point that I didn't want anything to do with it anymore. So it was difficult, really, to look myself in the mirror and think, I can't believe I'm doing this anymore. So it was convicting to even do my job. Like it was like I am literally lifting up the world and the things of the world. I'm an ambassador for that. So it wasn't that difficult for me to walk away. I talked about how like, I wasn't going to be on TV anymore. Somebody in town might not recognize me. Like that's very vain. So it was quickly I got past that and realized as I was pursuing His Word, He revealed more to me about, hey, you can still use your skill set in these areas. And then I went, when I did my own thing, I actually picked up with a basketball documentary and I had my own plan, if you will, because that's all I knew. And the documentary went well. But during that documentary, I was following a basketball team around. I also went to Guatemala for the first time. And that's when everything changed. Like that's when I realized like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to use my gifts for. And so I got connected with the founder of this ministry down there, the missionary. We hit it off real well. He is also a Kentucky guy. So we weren't that far from each other, had a lot in common. And we developed a relationship to the point that I went to Guatemala, I think almost a dozen times. I've been there a dozen times now, but then COVID happened before. So before COVID, I think I went 10 or 11 times in a matter of three years or so. So it felt like I was going down there every other month. It felt like,
Right.
but I was working with that ministry. He connected me with other missionaries, and it became clear like this is what you're meant to use your gifts for. And you want to talk about rewarding, to know that I was making an impact in the here and now, but also making an impact on the kingdom by doing His work through my skills. And that's what lights me up. Like, so I love where all that intersects. Like, right now I'm working on, my corporate projects are far from, I feel like, God's work, if you will. But at the same time, I do need to pay the bills because again, my ministry friends, not necessarily the ones that are keeping the lights on, for us, but that's not why I do those. And ultimately I want to get to a point where, it even lightens the load even more, on their budgets. But, I'm still working through what that looks like. But at the end of the day, His Word guided everything about what I do today.
A few years ago, you have what you call your personal financial breakthrough. Talk to us about that and how that's changed your life.
Yeah, it was 2020 when, well, I'll go back a little bit. Guatemala is really when everything kind of shifted because I wasn't making a ton before that. And I wasn't charging those ministry partners a lot at all. I had already mentioned how we went, like, they basically paid my costs to get down there and they all chipped in. Different ministries would chip in for me to go to different organizations once I start to go there more regularly. So that wasn't exactly, financially the most rewarding. Like that's not why I was doing it, like I said. But when I'd come back, I started to get contacts from, just quote unquote randomly. I talk about how, you give, you get something in return. That wasn't why I did it. It's not why I do it still to this day. But I've discovered that every time that I give back just a little bit in my space of video production, God has something bigger and better waiting around the corner. So, I've experienced it with, even to the church that we go to today. It's how that happened is all a God thing. And all I did was step out and offer up my services for free. I just felt called to. And then that turned into a number of other clients, including universities. And again, only way I can explain it is that every time that I trust God with something and that I follow those convictions, he has something waiting around the corner for me. And so as that started to develop through those Guatemala experiences, and then we hit COVID, where people and businesses were shut down for a number of months, including my own. Like, I couldn't be in person for months to do a shoot.
Right.
Fortunately, God just happened to place a client in my lap who I was connected through another client, and I got that client through, my TV. I can trace everyone back to. This is incredible to me. Like, that's how I know God's work is all over. I can trace every client back to something previously. It's not very rarely do I get someone that says, "Oh, I found you on Google," but it's been my relationships, whether it's relationships from the TV industry, from church, from the mission, whatever it looks like. Like, I can trace them all back and just see how God's fingerprints are all over it. But when 2020 hit, again, a random, if you will, client fell into my lap with months load of editing that she needed to be done. And that's just when everything exploded. 2020, while it was detrimental to so many others, for me, it's when things took off. And that's actually when my wife left her job too. The start of 2020, she left her job. So I guess in January, and then COVID was here, right? Like, but it wasn't until like February, March that things got shut down,
Right.
if I recall correctly. So there was a couple months where it was good, and then all of a sudden shut down, and that's when things took off for me. So as bad as it was for the world, I just trusted God through it, and I know my wife as well, because she was like, "What have we done? Like, I just left a paycheck. How are you gonna, provide?" And it's just incredible to see how. So from 2020 on, that's when things really blew up, if you will. Like, I started to get more and more clients. I started to have more opportunities in that space, and all it was it took years, back to that garden and harvesting. Like, it took a few years for that to happen. I started my business in 15. It took to 2020 for it to really take off. But, it was years of just planting and watering and pruning and just trusting God in that whole process. And thankfully, again, my wife had a W-2 job to pay for our bills, if you will, as I organically grew. And just, it's been incredible to see just how faithful he's been in that process. Because, things could have easily have shut down for me well before COVID, and they could have shut down in COVID, but it's just been wild to see how he's blessed us in this whole process.
And a big part of this for you has been investing, and your final chapter is really on how to invest, why people should invest, and things like that. And sure, like for me, I have a 403B because I work in the public sector. And so I have my own private retirement fund, and we do some investments on the side with that. My wife obviously has some investments, but it's not something that we've seriously thought about from a technical standpoint like you have. And I think that there are a lot of people that are interested in investing that just don't know where to start. So, as we start to wrap up today, maybe talk to us about why investing is so important. And then what are since you've been very successful in that space, what are some tips that you would give to people who are interested in it, but maybe haven't taken the first step?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I said, I stumbled across it and I was listening to podcasts in the personal development space. So I wasn't even seeking out something in investing or anything like that. It literally fell into my lap. This wasn't something that was passed down to me from family or even friends. But as I started to listen to personal development podcasts, it was an entrepreneur of some sort or an investor just happened to be on the show talking about what he was doing. It sounded attractive to me, what he was doing. So I started to listen to real estate investing podcasts and I started to read books. So my first thing is to just start listening to podcasts, start reading books, start educating yourself, start telling other people what you're interested in. Most people are going to look at you kind of strange, but at the same time, there is going to be someone along the way. God will place someone along the way that can relate to you and say, "Hey, I do that as well," or "I know somebody who does that," or "Hey, I may have an opportunity for you." Because that's how it's happened for us. Like, if you just talk about it, and the same with video production. When I just talk about what I do, odds are good someone is going to have a quote unquote need for that service or know somebody that may need that service. But I think if you just educate yourself, reading, podcasts, spending time, replacing things that we may do on a daily basis. I talk about in my book all the things that I've replaced, from watching TV to listening to the radio. I've replaced those things with reading. I've replaced those things with listening to the podcast instead when I'm in the car, especially on longer drives. We just went on a road trip where we got all kinds of podcast time in, even though my kids are like, will you please put something else on, But I'm like, look, this is for your own good, So
Yeah.
I'm trying to help you out. But, they're not listening to that. It's just dry to them. But just educating yourself so that when the time comes, because it will, it took me a solid year or more of educating myself. I mean, I was reading and listening daily because I wouldn't consider myself, like I said, as a numbers guy. It was difficult for me to wrap my head around, and it still is. Like, it's still challenging to me. But as I read about it and heard other people's stories, and these are simple people, and I'm thinking, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And so if I can do it, you can do it. Like, that's my whole message to people. But it takes time. It takes effort. It's not easy. But as you get reps in, you start to feel more comfortable about it, and more confident in yourself to step out and reach out to investors, reach out to real estate agents, reach out to lenders, brokers. There's so many people out there that are resources that have helped me along the way. I certainly have not done this on my own. It's really been as simple as educating myself and networking. And then that's where clarity came. Like, I start to get more clarity about what it is that we should pursue. And that's even evolved just over the short 4 years that we've been doing this. So for me, it's just starting to read, starting to listen, and figure out. You'll get clarity about maybe what it is you should pursue in that space, because there's so many areas in real estate that can be pursued, and that is one of the challenges. Like, to really figure out, okay, what is it that I ultimately want to do, or I feel like I can do. But for me, it's just start reading, educating yourself, and you will get clarity along the way.
So talk to us a little bit about your company and then your investments and where you would like to see those go in the future.
Yeah. So as of today, we have 3 rental properties, one of which we live in. So this is a great tip, more ideal for someone who's younger. And I say younger, maybe it doesn't have a family, but what we do, and this is well into, like, a few years into our investing journey, we're doing what's called a house hack. So we live on this main level and we have the basement area, but above us is a finished and furnished apartment. And so we host guests on a midterm basis, meaning 30 to 90 days. It could be longer. Our current guest is with us for up to 7 months. And so we furnish it so they have a place to stay. It's just like a hotel, just like an Airbnb, if you will. We take care of the utilities. We take care of the maintenance. All they do is have to come with their suitcase and they stay, but they pay a significant number, and that helps us pay for our mortgage. So our mortgage isn't much at all, because of that rental that we received there. Our journey started when we turned our original primary residence into a long-term rental. So that was when the interest rates were at the bottom. Like 2.7 is what this interest rate is on the home. I thought, well, there's no way we can sell this. Like, we should sell this. This should be our bank. Like, if we sold this, yes, we'd get a huge profit, but the long play is to keep this as a rental. And so we turned that into a long-term rental. So we used to have one of each. So that's what our long-term rental was. Above us, like I said, is our midterm guests, and that's has helped us pay for our mortgage, house hacking. And we have another property just south of Cincinnati, and that's also for a midterm guest. So someone that's there 30 to 90 days, and they're typically traveling professionals. So you can have faith, you can trust that they're going to take care of the place. Like, it's not someone who's going to come in like an Airbnb and party for a night and leave it a wreck. Like, they're living there, so they're going to take care of it. And I vet all these guests. Like, they have to have a lease and all the, I do my best to mitigate the risk, but they are great guests, and you get a little more than you would typically a long-term because you pay for the utilities and stuff like that. But when we started this journey, we had a short-term rental in the Red River Gorge, and it's a mountain town in Kentucky, central Kentucky. And so that was actually our first space. So we've been in the short-term space, we've been in the midterm space, the long-term space, and we feel like where we want to continue to go is that midterm guest, because they take care of the property. It's a good return on our investment, and it allows us, again, right now, to really save money so we can buy our next primary residence. So that's our goal now, to get our next primary residence so we don't have to live underneath somebody, which, like I said, it's not ideal when you have a family. Like, I get it. They want to have our own space, but we have plenty of space where we're at. But it's just, again, a first world problem, right? Someone living above you. So it's not that big of a deal. It's a small sacrifice that we're making for the time being. But so we have 3 properties. And once we get out of this place, we'll turn this place into a midterm, the main level. The basement is actually a finished studio space. So we'll have 3 spaces here. So I'm all about maximizing what we have. And that was the plan when we bought this, to turn this into 3 rentals. And they all have separate entrances, and I could go down the details of that, but I'm not going to. But basically, this would be 3 spaces: the space in Bellevue, the space in Taylor Mill. So, just like that, 5, and then we'd have our primary. But we're also playing around with the idea of now selling our former primary and taking those profits and using that as a down payment for our next primary, and also the next investment opportunity. So there are so many strategies that could be deployed. Like I said, you can easily get distracted by all the shiny objects and the ways to do it. I find it fun, the journey of trying to discover, what fits our lifestyle and what we want to do. And eventually like anybody else, it'd be, great to be financially free. That would be awesome. Not have to worry about, have your rentals, paying those bills. But the point of all of this really is that, yes, be financially free, but then I can do whatever I want to do with video production. Like I say in my book, one of my goals is to give back to these ministries who have that barrier of, hey, I can't afford your services. And I'm playing around with what this idea looks like. I already have a half off discount for them, and they still can't afford that. And I get that. Right. But I want to get to the point where I'm like, hey, you're only paying half. And this half that you're paying is I'm going to turn around and give this to a ministry of your choice. So you're now impacting somebody else. So I'm not getting anything. You just have to, get me there. I'll take whatever you pay me for this. I'm going to, we'll bless another ministry with this. So ultimately, I don't want to be a barrier for them at all. Like I want for them to see the value in it. And most do. When they do the video, they're like, wow, we probably should have done this years ago.
Right.
But I get it. That financial barrier is there. Like I can say it till I'm blue in the face, but I'd like to eliminate that. So the goal is for us to be financially free, so we can just do that stuff and me not have to charge them what I typically charge a corporate client. But even half of it, if I could just give it back to another ministry, some of it most are connected to other ministries, and they support other ministries. They do it together. So take that and bless someone else with, because what I've discovered also is that they have to have some skin in the game. Otherwise, it's just not appreciated. I don't want to say that I've been taken for granted, but it's kind of been my experience. When you give something away, unfortunately, people don't appreciate it. If they had, skin in the game, by that, obviously an investment, money, and, put on the table. So maybe that would inspire them, like, okay, this is costing me something, if you will, but at the same time, he's taking this money and we're going to give this to another ministry. So multiple people are impacted. So that's the overarching goal with why real estate's even happening. Yes, provide for us, be financially free, but use my gifts without, being a burden to somebody and saying, oh, I can't afford you. Well, I'd like to switch that, if I could, that mindset, and say, no, you're not, a burden. You're a blessing. You're blessing someone else because of what you're charging us. Plus, you're giving us this tool for us to grow.
Yeah, well, I love that. Well, Kyle, it's been awesome talking with you this morning. The book is Faith and Finances. It's right behind me here. It's on Amazon. I would highly recommend everyone pick up a copy. It's not a long read, and you'll get some great advice and just tips along the way here. But before I let you go today, Kyle, just maybe tell my audience where they can find your work if they're interested in kind of seeing what you're doing, or maybe even using you for like the work that they need done.
Yeah, so my website is Revived Productions, Revived Productions. That's my website. It's got my work on there. Not really active on social media outside of my daily devotional. So if someone wants to connect with me, that is the common thread that we have right here, right? Jesus. Right. So every day I put out a daily devotional on Instagram and Facebook. It's called Walk with Jesus Daily Devotional. And all I do is read a chapter a day, and I share what stood out to me, and hopefully connect with other people around the world about our faith. And so that's where I'm the most active. If you want to reach out to me, but again, you can find me on my website as well. It has my email and my other social medias. But again, I'm not the most active on there. I try to stay off of that as much as I possibly can. I know you and I have that in common, but I'm as guilty as next. I can scroll, but I try to stay away from those platforms as much as I can.
Yeah. Hey, well, Kyle, thank you so much for coming on the show today, man.
Appreciate you, Alex. It's been a blast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Protestant Libertarian Podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at theprotestantlibertarian@gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter. You can follow me at the handle @ProLibertyPod. Again, that is @ProLibertyPod. And you can also visit me at theprotestantlibertarianpodcast.com. At theprotestantlibertarianpodcast.com, you can also support the Christians for Liberty Network and the Libertarian Christian Institute. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, and we will see you next Tuesday.